Hello, friends. Welcome back to Transcendent Astrology and Tarot. My name is Michelle Fondin. I'm an author, speaker, YouTuber, and astrologer, and I'm here to talk about the full moon in Scorpio that's happening on April 23rd, 2024 at 4:49 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're interested, please do stay tuned. If you're new to my channel, welcome. Thank you for subscribing below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications, and thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. I do tarot and astrology readings. You can book that below at my website, michellefondinauthor.com. So the full moon in Scorpio is happening at 4 degrees Scorpio. A full moon happens when the moon is opposite to the sun. The sun is currently at 4 degrees Taurus. So when the sun and the moon are in opposition, that means it's a full moon. And what do full moons mean? Well, full moons, if you haven't noticed, happen every month. And sometimes once in a blue moon, they happen twice in a month. They happen about once a month, and the lunation cycle means when the moon is coming into fullness and when it's reached the height of its fullness in the sky, that means that something in our lives is coming to the fullness of fruition. It can indicate endings, it can indicate new beginnings, it can indicate something that we need to release and let go. Now, the fact that it's happening in Scorpio really emphasizes this point, because Scorpio, being the 8th sign of the zodiac, is all about deep, deep transformation. And Scorpio's modern ruler is Pluto. Its ancient ruler is Mars. And really, according to Robert Hand, who wrote Horoscope Symbols, he believes that Pluto is a much better fit for Scorpio than Mars ever was. He believes that Mars is way more appropriate for Aries, that is about starting things in action. And here we are with a modern ruler, Pluto, and this is a perfect fit, seemingly, for Scorpio. However, we can't ignore the fact that Mars is also a ruler of Scorpio, but we're going to dig deep into that a little bit later in the video. Let's look at what the sky looks like right now on April 23rd, 2024, just to give you a visual. I'll put the chart up there to give you a visual of what the astrological signs, what the zodiac looks like in the planetary positions at the time of this full moon. So we've got a lot going on in the sky, but we've got a big cluster of planets happening in Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. We've got Pluto, which is a lone man in Aquarius. And of course, we have the moon in Scorpio, and we've got the South Node in Libra. But everything else is in the other part of the sky, which is where most of the planets are situated right now. We've still got Mercury retrograde until April 25th. We just had this phenomenal once in 14 years conjunction between Uranus and Jupiter, and once in I don't know, it's been 80 some years that it happened in Taurus. That just happened on April 20th. So we are still, without a doubt, feeling the effects of that great conjunction between Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus. And if you have not yet checked out my video on that conjunction, that rare conjunction, I'll put the link to the video right here. What else do we have going on? We've got Mercury conjunct the North Node in Taurus at this time. We've got Mercury conjunction to Venus, which is separating. We have Mercury conjunction to Chiron separating. We have Mars sextile the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, but it is separating. And we have Mars sextile Uranus, which is applying. Applying means they're coming closer together. And then we have Mars septile Pluto. Yes, you heard me right. Mars is septile Pluto. Septiles are more rare aspects, and we're going to talk about why that is important during this full moon in Scorpio. The moon in Scorpio creates the need to dive deeply into your own feelings, to go to the depths of your feelings and go into the most personal areas of personal transformation. Now, Scorpio is a fixed sign. It is a fixed water sign. As I mentioned, its rulers are Pluto and Mars, and sometimes Scorpio gets a bad rap. I love Scorpio. I don't know, there's something about me and my birth chart. In fact, the two great benefics, Venus and Jupiter, happen to be in Scorpio in the 5th house in my birth chart. So I don't know, perhaps because the benefics are in Scorpio in my chart, that's why I have such a great love for Scorpio. I adore Scorpio topics and Scorpio people. Why does Scorpio get such a bad rap? Because Scorpio is often so misunderstood. Being a water sign and a feminine or yin sign, Scorpio is actually introverted. It's an introverted sign. And because it's fixed water, it really does like to dive deep into the depths of what it means to be human, with the first illumination of what it means to be spiritual. This is really the first glimpse into spirituality in the zodiac as we reach the 8th sign of the zodiac. I'm going to read to you the Sabian symbol for 4 degrees Scorpio. Now, Sabian symbols represent an interpretation of where the human development is at for each of the degrees of the zodiac. There are 360 degrees, like in a circle, and we're going to read the Sabian symbol interpretation that was made by Dane Rudhyar in his book, The Astrology of Personality. I'm going to read it to you now, and I'm going to read it to you a little bit later during this reading to help you really understand what this full moon in Scorpio is all about. The Sabian symbol for 4 degrees Scorpio is youth carries a lit candle in his first church service, beginning of spiritual participation in the world's work, sustained inspiration, conscious linkage to inner realities. Scorpio is the first encounter with the ego's death. Why? Because if you are newly awakened to spiritual concepts as a human, the ego automatically has to take a back seat to spiritual concepts, to the soul. And the ego really doesn't like this. The essence of Scorpio and Scorpio's transformation is mystical. It's beyond explanation. A true Scorpio person likes this aspect of transformation and likes the aspect of experiencing deep emotions, whether good or bad. In fact, a Scorpio would rather experience pain than experience no emotions whatsoever. Another reason that Scorpio gets a bad rap is because of the connotation with sex and sexual activity. A Scorpio does not want to be a player. A Scorpio does not want to have sex for sex's sake. The Scorpio wants to experience that spiritual merging with another person. In the spiritual merging of the sexual act, you have to lose your ego momentarily. It's a moment of transcendence. And so the Scorpio really seeks that moment of transcendence. And that is why Scorpios are often seen as very sexual creatures. It's because of that. True Scorpios see living as a series of birth, living, death, and resurrections. Because of this nature of Pluto, which is about transformation, and that includes the life cycle. It includes the life cycle of birth, life, death, and transformation. And so Scorpio really embraces this type of energy that endings are not just endings, but they are transformative and they lead to new beginnings. Like all water signs, Scorpio's feelings can get hurt, deeply hurt. But a Scorpio may not necessarily show that they're deeply hurt. They might seek revenge. They might seek to hurt because they are hurt. Scorpios can also be accused of being silent or secretive, and that's mostly because they are misunderstood. Scorpios are often misunderstood for their deep emotions and the way they like to dive deep into the darker topics. And so people sometimes are very dismissive of Scorpio's feelings. And because they're dismissive, Scorpio would rather hide than express their feelings, the deepest, darkest depths of their feelings, and then be rejected. So I hope you get a bigger view of what Scorpio means in astrology now to better be able to understand how this is affecting you during a full moon phase in Scorpio. Because the full moon coming to its fullness means it has reached its end point and it's going to retract. And so when we think about the concept of birth, life, death, and resurrection, the moon experiences this every 28.4 days or so, or a fourth of a day. And so since the moon does experience this, it's not so far away from Pluto. It's just that Pluto moves a lot slower. And because it moves slower, it happens to dig a little deeper, whereas the moon is a more natural recurring theme of this. And so we experience the moon more as this recurring theme, whereas Pluto goes so much deeper and a lot slower through the process. Pluto is the ruler of Scorpio, is obviously the most appropriate, being that it goes slow, it's about going really deep, and it's about the underworld, right? And since Scorpio likes to dig deep into those darker emotions, Pluto is the lord of the underworld. Any planet that happens to be in Scorpio is going to become an agent for that person's transformation, deep transformation. Planets in Scorpio operate with intensity and usually big emotional intensity. Now let's equate this to the moon. The moon is about our emotions too. So you get a moon in a sign and you get moon in different phases, and that's where the word moody becomes. It emanated from the moon's changing cycles, the moon's changing mood as a part of the cycles. Just naturally, the moon does represent our emotions. And so when we get a moon in Scorpio, imagine how deep those emotions go. Now that we've really gotten the bigger picture of Scorpio, the moon, the full moon, I think it's really important that we take a look at the planetary aspects that are happening here. Now, the interesting part about the deep transformation of the full moon in Scorpio is that right now at 4 degrees Scorpio, the moon is squaring Pluto in Aquarius at 2 degrees. Now, because the moon and the sun are in opposition, the sun being at 4 degrees Taurus, it means that the sun at 4 degrees Taurus is also squaring Pluto in Aquarius at 2 degrees. Squares represent tension. It's tension. Things are a little tense. And we think about the tension between the moon squaring Pluto, and Pluto being the modern ruler of Scorpio. What does that bring to you? It's going to bring you deeper emotions and deeper transformation. Now let's dig a little deeper into this, because I think this is important, because this is the key topic here. What does Aquarius represent? Aquarius represents something modern, scientific, but it also represents the people, like we, the people of the United States. It represents the people. It represents the collective. It represents groups. So when we think about Aquarius, we're thinking about the greater good. Now let's go back to Scorpio. Scorpio is really more about the individual, because the individual is transforming and changing. But here we are squaring Pluto in Aquarius, which is about the collective changing. And then there's tension there. So during this full moon phase, I believe you are going to be faced with major questions. Major questions about how you are transforming and changing from the inside out, what you desire, how you operate, how you act, your spiritual beliefs, the beliefs that expand you, the beliefs that start to squash the ego a little bit. And that's going to come in direct conflict with what is for the greater good. What is for the greater good? Now, the sun being in Taurus is not going to help that situation at all, because Taurus is really about what's me and mine. It really is. It's about what's me and mine. Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac. The first sign is about here I am world. The second sign is about what do I have? What can I accumulate to make it in this world? And so it really isn't too concerned with the collective, because it's about accumulating everything you need for this life. So we have a conflict, an inner conflict. Now, it's not surprising that this full moon is happening here at this degree in 2024. In 2024, we are experiencing so much change in the collectivity. There's so much tension in the collectivity. There's turmoil. There are questions about the future. There are questions about the present. There are questions about how the world is changing and transforming before our eyes. And since we are faced with these huge questions right now, we are going to need to get deep with ourselves and say, do any of my views, do any of my desires hurt the greater good? Are any of my needs, my wants, my desires going to come into great conflict with what is for the greater good of my city, my state, my country, the world, the environment, the animals, the other creatures on this planet? And that is going to be a struggle. It's going to lead you to make transformations and changes. But it's going to be a struggle between, do I be selfish and only think of myself? Or do I take into consideration others on this planet when faced with my morals, when faced with my views, when faced with my belief systems? It's a real problem when you're faced with this. Let me reread that interpretation of the Sabian symbol, because I think this is actually perfect for this. A youth. So when we say a youth, we're talking about a young person, right? A young person who has not experienced a lot of the world yet. A youth carries a lit candle in his first church service. What does church service represent? Well, it represents A, spirituality. B, it represents the collective, because people collectively gather in a church. So we're talking about community. So not only are we talking about spirituality, but we're talking about community. Beginning of spiritual participation in the world's work. Spiritual participation in the world's work. So it's not about me. It's about the world. Sustained inspiration, where you feel the fire within, that inspiration, that spark within to serve. And conscious linkage to inner realities. So my inner realities are my internal battles, my internal struggles, my internal demons, my internal emotions about this. And this is really the juncture of where we are during this full moon in Scorpio. It's like, how does my inner reality reflect on the outside? Am I going to stand by my beliefs that I believe are going to lead the world to a better place? Or am I going to hold on to my inner beliefs and morals, even though I know that ultimately this will bring harm to others? Because it's good for me now, right? It's easy for me now. So I don't want to get into politics. I don't want to get into world events. I don't want to get into any of that. But you know where you need to take a look at this stuff. So let me give you a very silly example. I'm going to give you a silly example. I just finished my taxes. And normally, because I've owned my own business, I'm self-employed, I just finished my taxes. I've been doing my own taxes for years, since about 2009. And typically what I'm doing is I'm printing out on paper all of my bank statements for the year, all of my credit card statements for the year. I print out everything. So by the end, before I even start my taxes, I probably have hundreds of pages or maybe 100 pages of paper. I've done this every year. And this year, I put that into consideration and I said, well, maybe I can do everything digitally. I can have everything on PDF, put it in a spreadsheet, and I don't have to print a single thing. And I did that because I'm trying to be conscious of the environment and not wasting paper and not using printer ink. And I did. I totally transformed and changed the way that I did taxes this year. Now, I say it's a benign and silly example because that one specific change may not change a whole lot. Yes, it's more friendly to the environment, but when I talk about the Plutonic changes and the Scorpionic changes that will take place within you as you reflect on the world at large, they may come out as much bigger changes than that. I spoke about the square between Pluto and the moon, and then Pluto and the sun. But the last aspect I'd really like to talk about is this septile between Pluto and Mars. Mars is in Pisces. Pisces is the most spiritual sign. It's the 12th sign of the zodiac. Pisces really does expand to think about the greater good of the entire planet. And Mars, which is normally a very ego-centered planet, if you will, Mars is the warrior. Mars is doesn't think through things. Mars is action first. Mars can be represented also by the ego. Mars is now in Pisces, the sign of spirituality. Septiles are very spiritual aspects. They're spiritual, they're fated, they're more rare than other aspects. And what is it, septile? Mars, the normal ruler of Scorpio? It's septile Pluto. So I really believe there is this symbiosis between the two rulers of Scorpio. There's a symbiosis between the two rulers of Scorpio getting together to really agree on something needs to be done for the greater good. And this is so beautiful. When I looked at this, I was like, this is amazing how the world works, how astrology works. Is that Mars, for a moment, is relinquishing its ego in Pisces to be okay with Mars, deeply transforming things in the world so that the greater good can be seen, so that the light can emerge. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. Just remember leaders like Mahatma Gandhi who did very little things, little changes, little things that created a ripple effect that had deep, transformative effects that ultimately freed India from British rule. So it wasn't about an individual whose name we know today, right? It wasn't him. It was the little actions he took that had a ripple effect so that other people also took action. And that's really what this full moon in Scorpio is all about. It's about you with your deepest emotions, your deepest desires, your morals, your values, being faced with that, being faced with what is the best for me, but really what is the best that I can help serve others, society, the greater good, so that it may too transform because it needs to transform. What can I do? And this often will come as a small change that will then have a ripple effect to bigger changes. So I hope this inspired you to look at this full moon in a very different light than many other full moons in your recent past. So let's take a look at what the tarot has to say about this full moon in Scorpio. So dear angels and guides, what can you tell us about the full moon in Scorpio? What does this audience need to know to be able to move through this planetary aspect, especially with Pluto squaring the full moon? We've got the Queen of Wands in reverse, and it says, my way or the highway. We spoke about that. We certainly spoke about that. Let's see what else. What else do you need to tell this audience about this full moon in Scorpio and what they need to know? Five of Cups, unwelcome change, sadness, grief, loss, mourning, emotional baggage, resisting change. It's also represented by Mars and Scorpio at the top of the card. So remember how I said that Scorpio is about digging deep into your darkest emotions. Five of Cups, digging deep into your darkest emotions. What else can you tell us about the full moon in Scorpio, please? Winter solstice, find the light within. Okay, find the light within. What did I just say? Scorpio is the first glimpse into the light in the entire zodiac. Being the eighth sign, it is the first time the ego is starting to take a back seat. So the light can come in. I love it. So before we qualify these, the first card, Queen of Wands in reverse, my way or the highway. Honestly, that is Mars in Scorpio, right? Mars in Scorpio is like the ego fighting for, I want to feel the way I feel, I want to be the way I want to be, and I don't want to change. Fixed water signs, a fixed water sign really doesn't want to change its opinion. A fixed water sign doesn't want to change its emotions. It's almost like they will sit there and go, you can't make me change my mood. You can't make me change my emotion. I'll do it when I want to. That is really like the one side of Scorpio before Scorpio lets the light enter. So let's see, what are the solutions here for the full moon in Scorpio, please and thank you. What is the solution to the first card? Winter, oh, here we go. Another, this is a different deck, but it's the same deck, if you will. It's like a slightly different variation. Winter solstice, finding the light within. Okay, that's the second time this card has come out. Second time. That's on top of my way or the highway. So it's not about my way or the highway. It's about finding the light within. Now look, Pluto gets a bad rap too, just like Scorpio gets a bad rap. The planet Pluto, as what it represents in astrology, gets a bad rap. But Pluto really is about finding the light within because it incinerates everything else that is not necessary. So ego dominance is not necessary to finding the light. And so Pluto will help incinerate the ego so that you can see the light within. What is the solution to the Five of Cups, please? A very Scorpio card. Okay, we need to reshuffle. Nothing is coming out immediately. Let's reshuffle that. What is the solution, please, for this full moon in Scorpio for the Five of Cups? Page of Swords in reverse, playing mind games. Now, I feel this is actually what you can do. This is what you can do, because this is the solution. Playing mind games with yourself. Playing mind games with yourself to get out of this deep emotional funk, the deep emotional baggage. Play mind games with yourself. The mind games are like, what if I were to let go of this self-pity just for a day? That's playing a mind game with yourself. Let's see, if I take that piece off just for one day, how would my day go? How would I feel? If I decide to let go of this self-blame, how long could I go? I'm gonna give myself a day. Let's just say, I'll give myself a day, let go of the self-blame just for one day. I can pick it up tomorrow if I want to. But I really feel like that's one way to get through the deepest, darkest emotions of Scorpio. Let's see, one more solution to finding the light within. How do we do this? How do we do this? How do we find the light within, angels? Knight of Swords, out of your depth. I believe, it's in reverse rather. The Knight of Swords, out of your depth. I believe that this is going beyond your comfort zone. Going beyond your comfort zone. I really feel so out of your depth. I feel like this is like doing something you would normally never do. Doing something that feels so uncomfortable to you. Doing something that feels like you are free falling, right? You would normally not ride a horse in reverse. Something that feels like you're free falling. And I really believe that that is the solution to finding the light within, is going beyond that which you normally do. If you normally, for example, respond to every post on a certain topic on social media, it's that you never respond. Or if you look at certain news sites, or you look at certain media pages or social media, Instagram pages of people you follow, and it sets you off in a very emotional way, that you shut down your social media. Like, I don't know, you do something drastic. You do something that you would never think of doing in a million years. And that, I believe, is how you start to find the light within, is going out of the ordinary, out of depth, going outside of the norm, going outside of what you would normally do. And I really feel like the solution is there. The solution is following that deep intuitive sense that I need to start doing something to find the light. Whether it is the first finding the light within, but I also need to start finding the light within the world so that I can move in that direction. So deeply transformative for you. I hope you fare well during this full moon in Scorpio. And I hope this video was helpful. I want to thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for subscribing to my channel below. Click on the bell, scroll up to all for all notifications. Thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing this video with others who enjoy astrology. Thank you for your support of my channel. I have 11 published books. You can check them out below. You can also book a reading with me, and all those links are in the info.